check in now with David Preston of the New Harbor Group. Good morning, David.
Hey, Steve. Good morning.
Happy New Year to you. Have a happy holiday to you and your family.
Great. Thank you. You too, Steve.
So, David, we've talked a few times when we see some real stunning PR blunders. And, well, I got to tell you, I can't even begin with the Sony business. I don't imagine you can exactly foresee when you're going to cause an international incident with a recalcitrant state like North Korea. But I don't think they've covered themselves with glory in all of this, do you?
Certainly they got off to a slow start. And I think that was probably a function of the sheer volume of crises that they had to face. It wasn't just one big crisis. It was a series of them. So they've got the issue of how do we distribute the movie. They've got the issue of what do we do about the fact that our employees' Social Security numbers are all over the Internet? What do we do about these relationships with these movie stars who are, kind of emotionally needy sometimes?
Yeah.
But who we need to put together movies. So it was an ongoing, number of crises that they had to deal with. And then on top of that, you've got attorneys weighing in. And then there's a cultural issue that they've got to address that, they're a Japanese-owned company, different culture. And Japan has very real and much more real considerations relative to North Korea, much different ones than we do because they're neighbors. And so the combination of the different crises kind of came together and put them back on their heels for a couple of days. No question about that.
Can you draw all that together, or do you have to farm that out and deal with these one by one?
Well, I think you've got to prioritize. You certainly do need to prioritize. And so you've got the Social Security numbers, and you've got the relationships with the movie stars. Those are things that are going to have to be resolved over time and taken care of. The immediate issue that they really didn't focus on was what do we do about this Christmas Day release of the movie that we have planned? They kind of handed the movie theater chains a de facto veto of the movie being distributed when the chain said we can't take the security risk. And then they owned it. So Sony owned the decision not to distribute, when in fact it wasn't theirs. And so they might have handled that a little bit better and made it clear exactly how the decisions were being made. And that would have bought them a little time and space. So they could have done a better job with that.
And I see two other instances here where they really kind of blundered, where the CEO said, we didn't cave. And then the President of the United States says, why didn't he call me?
Right. So, and that's a function of, allowing the theater chains to control some of your destiny. You always want to be in a position where you're controlling your own destiny, and one way to do that is to fill the vacuum. They didn't fill the vacuum, as we discussed. In the first several days of this thing, they were very much back on their heels, not defining themselves on their own terms, which is the first rule of crisis communications. They might have considered to put the onus for the lack of distribution on the theater chains, and like I said, that would have bought them a little time and a little space, and that probably would have been the way to go.
At 7:44, I'm speaking with David Preston from the New Harbor Group. And, David, I imagine they have folks on staff who think about these things, or at the very least, the CEO's got to be aware of that he needs help. He needs to reach out to a company like yours. But these movie theaters are used to dropping the occasional bomb. I imagine they'll recover from this, right? I mean...
Yeah, they certainly will recover. And in fact, it looks like they've already started to recover. The movie was released on Christmas Day in kind of a guerrilla way, if you would think about it in those terms, which would be the way I would frame it, on Sony's terms. They're fighting back. They're not going to have the First Amendment. They're not going to be censored. That would be a way to define this thing. And they've kind of done that, but they really haven't sold that hard. That might be something that they might want to pursue if the horse hasn't already left the barn. But now that the release crisis, so to speak, has somewhat passed, they're going to have to get back to work and focus on some of these other things. They're going to take a longer time to resolve, like the matters of what to do about the confidential information about their employees that is out there, how to repair these relationships with these Hollywood movie stars, what they're going to tell their stockholders, how they're going to explain how the breach happened and how it's not going to happen again. So now that the immediate crisis, the distribution that had a specific date on it, which was Thursday, is over, they're going to have to move on to these other things. And those are going to take longer. But the good news for Sony is that the resolution of those crises will take place a little less under the public eye than the distribution one.
Gotcha. Well, and so, David, I thank you very much. And when you think about it, you could look at it another way and say, all over a stoner movie.
Yeah, not the best place to have a First Amendment confrontation.
No kidding.
Certainly not going with the wind or Sound of Music or anything like that, that's for sure.
David, thanks again, and have a great holiday. I appreciate it, and I hope we'll talk again in the new year.
No worries, Steve. Glad to do it. Always glad to come on. Thank you.
Great. David Preston at the New Harbor Group, our WPRO News Time 746 from the Providence Auto Body Right Now Traffic Center.